Welcome to tonight's Active Driver Cafe, the 1st of October 2024. And tonight we have on Andrew Smith, who's the Director of Planning and Transportation and Economic Development at Leicester City Council. And he's going to tell us why the city is transforming to be more walkable, more cycle friendly, and how that forms part of its long-term regeneration. But we are going to start, as we always do, with our crowdsourced news. And so let us take people's news and views from the floor. Anyone like to put their hand up and tell us what's happening? Yes, Becky from Brighton.
Hi, thanks, Robin. Brighton. I just have to share my disappointment that Brighton and Hove City Council have reduced car parking charges. It's not a total across the board reduction. It's bits here and there, but they are talking about wanting to increase demand for car parking. And this isn't because visitor numbers are down. It's because parking revenue is down. And I think that's very disappointing. They're even talking about giving car parking passes, or letting people buy them who are in future car-free developments. And this is a Labour council, and of course it's all being paraded in the news as reversing the war on the motorist. So there.
Yes, I saw the news. I had exactly the same feeling. Yes, so very much sympathy for you there. Rob from Hackney.
Hi everyone. I'm part of Hackney Cycle Campaign and also London Cycle Campaign. Just wanted to let you know about an ongoing campaign in Hackney. Hackney have released some designs for one of their most dangerous junctions, which basically are from straight out of the 1990s with a few advanced stop lines. And an early cycle release, it's a 5-arm junction which has a KSI on it slightly more often than every 2 years. Knowing that this was going to be coming down the line, we engaged a leading engineer to do an alternative design, which we put on the table for them in June. And they're basically obstinately sticking to their previous design, basically because they seem to be anti-cycle infrastructure in Hackney. The issues that we're facing are that there's a couple of trees which might have to go with our design, which seems like a very odd thing to trade off against cyclist safety, but also we're, in a borough like Hackney, it's very strange to see them raising accessibility concerns over the fact that cycle tracks are being put into a junction. So we're basically calling on the mayor to intervene at this point, because it looks like the decision is going to be made. I'll stick a link in the chat to our campaign page so you can see the designs and what's possible. It seems mad that no one that Hackney is able to be putting in a design which basically isn't compliant with Vision Zero or any of the other kind of gear change kind of requirements guidance. Can't wait for Active Travel England to actually have some teeth and be able to shut this kind of thing down.
Yeah, that is really very disappointing, particularly as you've gone to the trouble and doing a really good thing of getting an alternative design, and which it does sound a really good thing to have done. Yeah, good luck with the campaign. Obviously, we can't go into it in too much detail, but yeah, post the link in, and
yeah, will do.
I'm sure people from around
happy to answer nerdy questions about the improvements that we're actually provide. Our junction, it actually improves things for bus users, improves the performance of the junction as well as providing cycle safety. So it seems baffling that they're sticking to their guns. Thanks
for bringing it up. David from West Midlands.
Yeah, I don't usually speak, so I've forgotten how to replace the mute. Right, okay. A bit of a disappointment floating around in the West Midlands at the moment among cycling and active travel people. We don't quite know what's happening. A new mayor, Richard Parker, a Labour representative, was elected as mayor in May, replacing Andy Street. And we lobbied him to appoint a walking and cycling commissioner, which is a model successful in London, successful in Manchester, and many other places, and have been notably successful with Adam Tranter reporting to the previous mayor Andy Street in the West Midlands, and a hell of a lot of stuff got done and accelerated to a high standard. We had a level 3 assessment from Active Travel England. We had a generous allocation from place to many places with the CRSGS allocations and active travel funds and things. So I think it was going smoothly. But 5 months after the election, Richard's still not appointed or advertised for a walking and cycling commissioner. So we're really worried about a loss of momentum, basically. And there's emails going back and forth, there's stuff on Twitter, not that I use it anymore. And we're hoping we can persuade him to go ahead. Adam Tranter, as you know from here, was a real star. Andy Street really became effective on active travel once he had Adam Tranter reporting directly to him. Exactly the same as Andrew Gilligan and Boris Johnson in London, and now Will Norman. And you need to maintain momentum. I've been working on this stuff since 2010, initially representing the NHS. I've got the timeline. It is so slow, and we really can't afford to move back in the second city. That's all I wanted to say. Watch this space. If they would appoint someone, it's just the danger, in my view, is that the road safety establishment and some of the local politicians and probably some of the local officers at borough and city level didn't really like Adam Tranter coming in from outside and essentially telling them which way was up and how to do things. There's some resentment, and I suspect Richard, who's very new to the whole scene, not just active travel, but being a mayor, is being lobbied. But I don't know that. It's just my suspicion there's going to be a bit of backsliding. Okay, watch this space. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks for that, David. Yeah, I hope there is a re-energisation of that, because Adam is obviously great and remains very enthusiastic. He is coming to Active Travel Cafe in 3 weeks' time. I think he's having his appendix out this week, but hopefully that will all go well, because we really could do with him back on the scene. So you can ask him, we really. I think we all know Birmingham is in a bit of a mess roads-wise at the moment, and drastically needs a lot of sorting out. So having the mayor and some renewed action on walking and cycling is hugely important to millions of people. Adam, you're in a position to cheer us up. It's all been a bit downhill so far.
I think so. Avon Police Crime Commissioner have just are consulting on their police crime plan for 24 to 29. I'm assuming a lot of PCCs that just got voted in are doing a similar thing. And one of the national policing prevention strategies is identified on page 9. The primary one is preventing or minimizing the risk of harm to individuals through a focus on large populations, e.g. a public health approach. Now, this, I think, with the missions that Labour have set around health and also bringing active travel as a focus for them, could be an opportunity to kind of push for things like 20 mile per hour zones, speed limits, and also probably things like low traffic neighborhoods in terms of, reducing road danger. So I think there is an opportunity here for people to kind of go into this. And it's a bit like that time when, we were called to Bristol to look at cycling standards, which then eventually became LTM 120. These types of policies are almost hidden from general public, but can make a big difference in terms of the way councils address these types of, going forward on their road policies, their road danger reduction strategies, and tying that onto health. And I think, get involved. I'll send a link through to mine, but I'm assuming if you have a police crime commissioner, they will be looking to develop, and they've just had an election. They'll be doing the same, very similar thing.
Right, that is a good point. So we had our police and crime commissioner started drawing up his strategy. His previous strategy in his previous term didn't even mention road crime. So obviously we campaigned. He did a survey in his last term, and that actually put road crime as the most experienced crime and the crime that people were most worried about. And that, plus our campaigning around the election, I think helped to mean that the strategy, overall police and crime strategy, is just released, did include it. So I think you can make a difference by campaigning. Even just asking for a survey helped, I think. And moving the dial on this, I think, is really important. So that's Thames Valley Police. So yeah, it is worth moving the dial. Road deaths are greater than knife crime deaths. In fact, total homicides. So definitely worth the effort. Jill, where are you from, Jill?
Sorry, I hadn't put it on. Stevenage. This is
Stevenage. Oh, yes.
Very, very, very little bit of really, really good news. Having been talked about it, it's been talked about for literally years and years. Our hire bikes arrived today. So we've got Beryl hire e-bikes, 45 docking places across the town, and yet being used as of today. So there you go, some really good news.
Excellent. Thank you for bringing us some good news from Stevenage. Thanks very much. Graham, I know Graham is from Oxford, so I know Graham very well, and he got me into campaigning 10 years ago. So far away, Graham.
Can't see how to start video. I thought I'd mention in Cyclox in Oxford, a colleague put up a post from Highways magazine, a recent road safety special. I'll try and put a link into the chat. It was August, September 2024. And the reason for commenting on it is that it includes Susie Charman, the executive director of the Road Safety Fund. And the meeting or the seminar included the Oxfordshire maintenance engineer, and just a couple of sentences. It was observed that whilst the engineering element of highways is highly professionalized and advanced, the public education, training and publicity side of road safety is often done without evidence to support its efforts. In other words, some professionals are regarding the highway as being perfect, and it's the users that need to be changed. And I think this is outrageous. Anyway, thank you. I'll put a link.
Thanks, Graham. A good point, well made. And the last one before we go on to our speaker, then Adrian from Tunbridge Wells.
Hi there. Two things. One is that, just to follow on from Adam's point, 2020 is holding a webinar next Tuesday or Wednesday. It's the 9th of October. I got it, the 9th of October is in my mind. And we have speakers from Cornwall, Surrey, Oxfordshire and Cambridgeshire talking about how they've implemented 20 miles an hour. And we've got over 600 people registered already, but there's still room for a few more. That's one point. The second point is that KCC, Kent County Council, has just issued, or is about to complete its consultation on LGP5, Local Transport Plan 5. They had, I got hold of a document which said they were going to use vision and validate, in other words, say what they want rather than just predict and provide. And of course, they've completely ignored all that in the LGP5, and they think that the best use of their money, or anybody's money, is a Lower Thames crossing. So if anybody in Kent would like to submit a response to that, please go to the LGP5 website and say how useless the LGP5 is. Thank you.
Okay, right. Thank you very much, Adrian. And let us move on then to our main topic for tonight, which is Andrew from Leicester. Andrew, if you want to fire up your slides and start your presentation.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. My first challenge is to try and get my slides up. So let's see if I can do that. Can people see the slides?
Yep.
Lovely. Okay. Again, thanks for inviting me this evening. So I was invited to talk a little bit about our Heart of Leicester plan, and I guess, for in terms of the context that I'm speaking in, the interrelationship between that and active travel. For those of you that don't know Leicester, we're a fastest growing city, one of the fastest growing cities in the country, top 10 by size, multicultural, and active travel rated 3, aspiring to 4. And we've had an elected city mayor since 2011, which I think has been one of the driving factors behind the sustained investment we've seen in active travel over the period that brings us to the current time. We have a long and illustrious past, about 2,000 years of history. And I guess the history of our city and the history of the city centre in particular, which is our focus here, has been one of change. Just some examples of that here. Top left-hand corner. Obviously, we've moved a long way from 1978, where our city centre, this is our city centre, was heavily dominated by traffic. People squeezed onto narrow pavements, as you can see. We've been through a period of deindustrialization, a lot of textile factories in and around the city centre, a lot of people stripped out from working in and around there. We've, like a lot of cities, we've had challenges from out of town retailing, probably one of the largest out of town retail sites at Foss Park. And then more recently, as you'll all be familiar with, the impacts of COVID in relation to people choosing to shop online, not visit city centres, and also not work in city centres, so working from home, all of which has had a significant impact on our city centre and given us some major challenges. We're not alone, as I say. So from those challenges, we decided to produce a plan that drew together a range of actions and priorities to try and respond to that. And that is what we've called our Heart of Leicester plan. It's a 10-year plan. It hasn't been published yet, so don't go looking for it. You won't find it. We literally are still in forming mode at the moment. And what we've done is we have developed a vision, which is effectively three spatial levels. So the first level is very much focused on the city centre as a neighbourhood, place to live and work. We've got a very compact city centre, easily navigable by foot and by bike. And to that extent, we want to build on that. We want to develop that further. The whole city spatial scale, getting people into and out of the city centre for work, shopping and leisure as efficiently and effectively as possible, particularly focusing on walking, cycling and by bus. And then finally, looking beyond the city's boundaries, how do we connect people who live further afield into the city centre area, principally by rail and by bus. So we've developed 7 themes for the plan, for the Heart of Leicester plan, and I'll just touch on each of these briefly. So firstly, sustainable neighbourhood. We've been incredibly successful recently in regeneration along the waterfront of the city. This image shows the city centre literally as a stone's throw away from a new community of around 2,000 to 3,000 new homes. The importance of this, of course, is the proximity of regeneration and development to the centre, to services, to facilities, to work. And I think to that extent, it's part of our strategy of making sure we build appropriately as much as we can in and around the city centre, making it easier for people to walk and cycle to the things they need to get to. These diagrams sort of bring to life development activity and how we've managed to bring about densification of, if you like, of residential development in the city centre. On the left-hand side, and you can see a plan that shows the ring road, the grey ring road around the city centre area. Back in 2004, had about 5,000 people living in and around this area. Each of the dots represents development activity, planning applications, pre-application activity. Very, very little, as you can see back then. Project ourselves forward to 2022. a lot more activity going on across the whole of the city centre, and particularly around the north area where our regeneration areas are. But you can see how we're up to something like 22,000 people living in and around the city centre now. And so making accessibility easier across the centre has been a primary objective for us over the last sort of 15 or so years. Projecting forward, we see major opportunities in further densifying development in and around the central area, particularly around what we're calling the northern arc of development, which extends from the waterside area, which I've shown you in the earlier image, all the way around to Leicester railway station. We think there's something like scope for something like 6,000 homes on brownfield land, which would take us up to a neighbourhood of around 30,000 people. So a real major boost to population in and around the centre. Obviously, people need places to work. Otherwise, they'll be hopping on or in their car or on a bus or trekking out of the city centre. We're trying to provide opportunities for working in and around the centre, focused on managed workspace, in particular delivered by the local authority. So there's a couple of examples here of managed workspace at what we call the Space Park. Leicester, focused on space and satellite technology. And then on the right-hand side, creative workspace supporting new creative businesses. We've managed to create something like 1,000 new jobs from managed workspace provision, as I say, in and around the centre, giving people the opportunity to live and work in close proximity. Retailing is changing, as we all know, and again, we have seen and we've been encouraging diversification of retailing away from those more traditional formats, some of which we recently had M&S closed down, for instance, in the city centre. We've seen a big growth in independents or boutique shops, leisure operators, and that's helped us to sustain quite a stable position from a retail position. But of course, alongside the approach to try and develop a more dense neighbourhood, that creates opportunities for retailing, for cafes, etc., type of thing in its own right. So it feeds itself. We are a sporting and cultural city. As I say, we've got a wealth of history dating back to Roman times. We're just in the process of finalising a new Roman museum experience. As some of you may well know, we discovered a king in a car park, Richard III. And that's proved to be extremely popular in terms of attracting people to the city. What we're trying to do now is to encourage more stayovers, so people stay overnight, spend money on shopping, leisure, etc., hotels, to boost our tourism economy. And we've had a measure of success. This seems like a dim and distant memory now, thinking back to the championship win of last season, but perhaps the less said about that, the better. But of course, the football, rugby, hockey, etc., and basketball does bring a lot of activity in the centre. We work very hard with sporting clubs on active travel and ensuring that people get to those venues through the most sustainable means. Big plans afoot from the football club to extend their stadium, and again, there's been a whole host of work there trying to ensure that cycleways, other pedestrian improvements that we've been carrying out, linked directly into new infrastructure like this. We do some slightly crazier things in the city as well to bring people in. We have probably one of the best set of murals maybe outside of London. We've got something like 150 murals by internationally renowned mural artists, including in the centre here, we think is the tallest mural possibly in the world, or certainly in Europe. And that helps to animate our city centre and again bring people into the centre. But we do interesting things like we have active travel trails, cycling trails, touring people around the murals. We host a huge number of events in the city centre as well. something like 300 plus a year. So again, a good deal of work goes into making sure that people can walk and cycle to those events. In terms of connectivity, we have invested hugely in what we call our Connecting Leicester programme over the last 15 years. A lot of funding's gone into bus travel, so something like 50% of our fleet, 134 buses, are now electric, all painted green. We don't have a franchise. This is done through an enhanced partnership with the operators. We've rebuilt our two bus stations. We've done a whole host of other things alongside that to encourage bus travel. We're just embarking on a journey of rebuilding the railway station, and again, this has built within it cycle parking, as you'd expect, integration with other transport, bus, cycle, walking, and we've spent a huge amount of time and effort working with accessibility groups to make sure that the station is fully accessible to all. That goes to planning committee tomorrow night, so I've got my fingers crossed on that one. Our Connecting Leicester programme started out as a concept, really started by our elected city mayor back in 2011. The idea was to join together what were sort of known as effectively oases of activity, as you can see here, retail, Old Town, waterside regeneration area. Connectivity was very poor at that stage, and the ambition was to connect all of that together. So we have been very busy reclaiming lanes from roads. This is at Newark Street leading down to the De Montfort University. We have completely reconfigured junctions to allow high quality access for cycling and walking, prioritisation, taking out turns, etc. We have built, I think, 4 or 5 bridges now to create segregated means to cross the river and canals in the city, creating high quality cycleways and pedestrian paths. We have also invested very heavily in the city as a green and historic place. So lots of money's gone into bringing about the transformation of heritage areas like the Old Town on the left-hand side here, ensuring that we create, opportunities, good opportunities for people to walk and cycle and experience what are really attractive places. And equally, we've been planting trees, we've been creating the right sort of environment where people feel, happy to walk and cycle. We have stripped out car parks. We've removed road space. This was one of the first things we did back in 2012. Converting this to a nice square, Jubilee Square. This is that connects places of interest, retailing centres, heritage centres, the cathedral, etc., the university. And this was really a major step forward. We had a lot of opposition to taking out car parking. I'm sure many of you that will resonate with many of you, but our elected city mayor at the time said, no, we're doing it, we did it, and no one wants the car park back now, I'm pleased to say. And that's what it's used for, lots of different activities and events, and as a connecting space for cycling and walking. We have pedestrianised substantial areas of the city centre. This is De Montfort University, initially removing traffic and then carrying out a public realm scheme. Those of you that went to the recent Active Travel Conference in Leicester will recognise this space. Again, some examples of where we've taken traffic out, brought life and activity to streets, supported businesses to put chairs and tables out, creating that sort of European feel, if you like. Again, this is our most recent scheme, creating opportunities for businesses, cafes, bars and restaurants to spill out and people to move around comfortably in the city centre. This leads down to our Richard III Centre in the cathedral. And this was a brilliant scheme, literally taking traffic out. The clock tower here is at the heart of the city. If you know Leicester at all, this brought traffic, buses, pollution right into the heart of the centre. We managed to provide an alternative means to divert buses and exclude vehicles. And what you see on the right now is a complete pedestrian friendly area. We think, the largest pedestrian priority zone in the country that allows free access for cycling through it. And this is back to the image of 1978. Again, just looking northwards from the clock tower, and you can see, the change in the environment of what we have now, which is absolutely tremendous and fully accessible. Diagrams to show you how things have changed. This was the extent of improvements. The red streets were improved up to 2008 to 2011. And if we jump forward to 2024, you can see that virtually the whole of the city centre has been improved from a cycling and walking perspective. A lot of segregated routes, a lot of fully pedestrianised routes. And now you can see how the lines extend out through the radial routes connecting into the neighbourhoods. And that's really our focus going forward. We've built something like 26 kilometres of new and improved routes. Our next step is to build that out through the whole of the city, connecting into local neighbourhoods, 20-mile-per-hour zones, etc. And I think we're well on our way to achieving that vision that was set out back in 2011. And finally, the centre has to be a welcoming centre. We have our challenges. We have issues around street lifestyles, how we manage that. We have challenges around maintenance, having laid out, a huge amount of new improved streets over the last 10 or 15 years. And we also have, as I'm sure you'll recognise this problem, a growing level of concern around Deliveroo and other riders who are powering their electric bikes through our fully pedestrianised areas, and causing, as I say, a growing level of concern at the moment. We've got one or two ideas about how we might be able to start to deal with that as an issue. So that's our 10-year plan. Hopefully I've given you a sense of how active travel sort of meshes with our wider regeneration plans and our particular focus around improving the city centre in Leicester. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was a really good run through Leicester. I'm somewhat familiar with Leicester. It's been a few years since I've visited. My brother-in-law used to live there. But we've got lots of good questions coming. Just a few things for context. You talked about new jobs being put in the city. Would you say the centre of Leicester is a place that needs more homes, or needs more jobs, or maybe doesn't need more of either?
It needs both.
Needs
one
both.
of our, I mean, we've been very successful in bringing forward what started out as a lot of student accommodation, and now we're seeing a lot more private rented sector homes being built. And there's a strong pipeline of residential development and activity. We're also building our own council housing as well, and acquiring sites for council housing to deliver a mixed economy of residential development. One of our biggest challenges is securing funding to build Grade A office space. A lot of the office stock in the city it was built back in the 70s and 80s. Some of that's now been converted to residential under the sort of government's permitted development rights. But what we're finding is that the cost, and we're not alone, I think the cost of building high quality Grade A office space for things like the business and finance sector is challenging. We just don't get the rental levels here. So we're working on schemes, looking to government for funding really to help us to bring those about. But where we have been successful, as I said, is building smaller scale office development for specific sectors, growth sectors in the city, like creative and space and satellite technology. And as I say, that's generated around about 1,000 jobs within and sort of on the edge of the city centre. So that's had some positive benefit. The key for us is we've got to have people living and working in the centre. So if we're not successful in creating those jobs, then as I said, people will start to do what we don't want them to do, which is to start to travel out to the peripheries of the city where there are some job opportunities.
Yeah. Good. And there's a specific question behind this, but how far would you say you are through the overall plan in terms of A, cycling infrastructure, and B, walking?
I mean, I guess we're probably getting on for halfway through that plan, and we've pretty much dealt with the city centre area and the initial sort of radial routes that project out from the centre. We now have to take that all the way to the edge of the city. In some cases, we've done that on some routes, but we've got a lot more work to do there. And our plan is really to ensure that our neighbourhoods, and there are a series of neighbours dotted around the city, are well connected into that core framework, if you like. So the radial routes, the inner ring, and we've got an outer ring road as well that we will need to invest more in. From a cycling perspective, I think we're probably getting on for halfway there. We've built up a deal of momentum around that, and we're hoping that we will get local transport funds or whatever the new government wants to call them going forward. So we've got big plans. We've got our LC Whip document, which captures that. And from a walking perspective, a lot more focus around the neighbourhoods. We did come into some criticism or rather our elected mayor did, for investing very heavily in the city centre. It wasn't correct. I mean, there was a good deal of investment from, all of our schools have been renewed, for instance, in the neighbourhoods, all of our secondary schools at least. But I think there's definitely a counterweight to that now in terms of investing in neighbours and making sure that neighbourhoods function well for cycling and walking.
Right. And it's kind of linked to that then, have you found it easier to deliver active travel when it's part of a regeneration or part of urban realm improvement?
I would say yes. I mean, our approach, one of the advantages we've got, we're a unitary authority. Cycling, walking, public transport, regeneration, planning, development, all falls within my division, helpfully. That's not always the case, I think, in some authorities, and that's allowed us to ensure that things are joined up. So, urban design, joining up well with traditional highway engineering, joining up well with, my active transport team. I won't pretend that it always works perfectly, and there are challenges around joining that up. But I think it's easier to do when those are, within a sort of focused team. Obviously, I'm committed as a director to ensure all of that's joined up. And above me, our city mayor is very interested in regeneration, development, and public transport, cycling and walking. So I think we've been able to harness that, and the stars have aligned over a number of years now, and that's been a sustained effort to ensure we continue to join it all up.
What's the political support like in terms of political parties?
So I mean, it's been excellent. Our elected mayor is Peter Salisbury. He's a Labour. He's had a strong support from his group over the years. There has been a change in the political balance in the city. We've seen a shift to Conservative and Liberal and Independent and Green. But I think having an elected mayor that is there for 4 years does give you that stability, and I guess the support that we've seen from 2011 is very much there and solid going forward. So still a commitment to plan and deliver sustainable transport, active travel and public transport solutions. But of course, as I say, we are very dependent now on government funding. The council, like other councils, is in financial stress. I think the next few years is going to be quite telling for us and many others, no doubt.
Right, thanks. And there's a couple of questions about traffic management. Essentially, you talked about parking. Does Leicester have plans for a circulation plan or some other form of traffic management or a workplace parking levy? Zero emission zone.
You've hit on a sour note for me. I spent 3 to 4 years of my working life trying to deliver a workplace parking levy with support from Nottingham City Council, who have the only one in the Northern Hemisphere, as you'll all know.
Yes, yes.
We got within a hair's breadth of introducing it, and then COVID, and then cost of living, and then there were political ramifications with that. Interestingly, the education sector, bizarrely, rose up and became a real thorn in our side. We had thought that it would be business that became a challenge for us. Business seemed to be quite supportive, but the education sector was saying we can't afford this. It's going to impact on our educational provision. And despite trying to counter that, we ended up having to put that to one side, which was a massive shame. And so, yes, if anyone's thinking of doing workplace parking levy and wants to hear our story, it didn't end well, but it was certainly a good ride up until that point. I mean, the other thing, coming back to the circulation plan, etc. We have a very pro sustainable transport approach in the city. I'm hearing one of your participants earlier on. We are increasing parking fees and tariffs, and that's partly to bring about change in people's travel behaviour, but it's also about increasing the income that we get to to fund that as well. So I'm interested to hear that some areas are reducing their parking charges to increase their finances. That seems a bit short-sighted to me.
Yes, that was mentioned from Brighton, wasn't it? Yeah, so that's very interesting. Well, coming from Oxford, you see we're heading towards workplace parking levy. So
best of luck. Yeah.
The motoring campaign groups, campaigners who are against it, are trying to warm up the education and health workers against it. So yeah, I'm sure that will be a battleground. But has advantages. There's a few questions about pedestrian and cycling interactions, and this is always a good topic. And so there's one set which are around pedestrians and cycling and how does that work. And I think in some cases Leicester has been held up as a good example of that. And then there's another set which are around electric bikes and illegal electric motorcycles. So I wonder if you could just talk about that and how that works.
Yeah, so there are challenges here, as I'm sure all of you will appreciate. Having developed a large pedestrian priority zone that allows free access for cycling, that has been, generally speaking, operating well, I think. And if I judge that by the number of complaints that are received or have been received in relation to cycling and walking intermingling in the past, I think that by any measure has to be successful. Outside of the centre, we have been focusing on implementing segregated cycling and walking provision, LTM 120 compliant. And so, I think that's been working well. But we can see some of the strains around intermingling, cycling and walking in the central area focus largely on food delivery cyclists, as I say. We're seeing, an increased number of those, and it seems to have really ramped up in the last six months to 12 months. There's a clustering of activities that are very visible, and I think the algorithms that they work to, the cafes and bars, etc., cafes and restaurants, etc., they basically have to position themselves in groups nearest to where their orders come from. So you get a very visible presence in centres like Leicester, and I think that helps to bring it into people's, front and centre in people's eyes, minds. We are at the moment trying to think as to how we best tackle some of that. We're looking at public safety protection orders, and whether those might help us. We obviously are wanting to continually engage with the operators, although we've tried that. It's not been so productive. I mean, they tell you that, yeah, it's okay, we're safeguarding this and we're instructing all of our riders to behave in a particular way. Obviously, riders have a turnover. They turn over very regularly. So I think that's an uphill battle. I think there is an issue here for government and, lobbying government on measures to help tackle this. And I also think there's probably something more creative around talking to the operators about their algorithms and how you might sort of look at geofencing areas to try and avoid that clustering and try and spread, the issue, the very, very clear and visible issue out a little bit. But those are just things that we've sort of started to talk about over the last few months. I think this is an issue for all of us, all of us with city centres that have pedestrian areas. And I think it's in all of our interest to try and work together to try and find solutions to this, because it is a problem that is really taking hold in people's imaginations. You've only got to follow social media and look at some of the the more extreme comments in there to think, well, this is getting a grip. We need to try and ease it before it fully takes hold.
Yeah, I've got to agree. We've got a session in a few weeks' time, scheduled for November, I think, on that topic. Possible. The climate change charity have been looking into it, and also taking the delivery riders' perspective, because they're very often not in a good. When there's a triangle between the customers, the rider, the businesses operating it, and the restaurant and the platforms.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that
it's a complicated situation.
In terms of business activity, the activity itself is helping to support lots of small businesses in the city centre. So it's important that we don't throw out the baby with the bathwater, so to speak. And as you say, I think it's also important to recognise that the work context within which these riders operate, it can be very challenging. And I think it's how we recognise that amongst potential solutions, and don't arrive at something that's so draconian that it hurts people in work, and also hurts businesses that need the business ultimately.
Yeah. The bit I was interested just to explore a bit further, that where you say the kind of conventional cycling and walking is working well together. I wonder if you can call out any of the success factors in that, whether it's to do with street design or the spaces you've got, or people's natural attitudes, or whether it's just destined to work that way. So one of the other questions about street clutter, and whether you have any particular approaches to kind of A-boards or signage on the streets, or street furniture, which might be linked or it might not be.
Yeah, I mean, I think we've worked really hard, even pre-LTM 120, to bring about good quality street environments. And as I said earlier on, I think that's been positive in terms of bringing together our more traditional sort of highway engineering thinking, and then bringing to bear urban design thinking to make sure that we end up with good quality streets that are well planned, with street furniture in the right places, which allow free movement for people, around the centre. In terms of attitudes, I guess people grow accustomed to that sort of environment. In fact, people forget. I continue to remind them what the streets were like before. People forget that, and they adjust themselves to the new environment. And I think that's worked pretty well, actually, judging by if you judge it against incidents or accidents, we've seen very, very little of that. I think we have had issues with A-boards, and our colleagues in licensing have worked hard to try and ensure that that's managed carefully, again wanting to try and support businesses, but ensure that we don't have impediments to movement for walkers, wheelers, cyclists in the street. And I think that's worked pretty well. Obviously, as I say, as we develop our street lifestyle, our streets for food and drink, actually ensuring that we don't clutter our pavements and prevent the very thing we've been trying to support over the years. That's been a challenge. So we work carefully with our licensing team on that as well. So yeah, I think it's been a successful journey. I mean, not to say that we haven't adjusted some things along the way. We've learned, by trying things out, something we've had to change over time, and no doubt that will continue as we move forward. I guess one of our biggest challenges will be, if we see another step change in cycling activity in the centre, what does that mean for that intermingling? The sharing of space, and how does that work going forward? And we may become a victim of our success at that point, but I think that's a little way off from now.
Good. And somebody's we think that you get involved with active travel groups, cycling and walking groups, talking to them. I mean, this is based on hearsay, so maybe you do, maybe you don't. Or it'd be interesting to hear to what extent that you do that in developing overall plans and like the LC Whip and specific schemes, and how useful that is.
Yeah, I mean, it's been central to the work that we've done. I've got one or two colleagues that are on the, in the group at this very moment. I've seen pop up. I've seen their names pop up, and they will no doubt, if they had the opportunity, would tell you how important our cycling forums are, our walking forums. We take our schemes to those groups, both from a project and a program, and also from a strategic planning perspective as well. And I think that's proved really, really helpful in ensuring that things are designed appropriately. We identify real problems from people who use our streets day in and day out. We've also, one of the things that have been more challenging has been, in terms of accessibility groups, we've tried different things over the years. We're working with a group called All In at the moment, which has all representatives from all number of sort of disability groups, representing the sort of full spectrum of disabilities. That is really a sort of a test bed for us, and I know that talking to others are sort of keeping a close eye on that at the moment to see how that works, and whether there's whether there's the opportunity to sort of learn from that and pick that up elsewhere. So I think that's probably been our most challenging area around accessibility groups, but we feel like we've arrived at something now that's working well. We've been incredibly involved in the railway station scheme I've been talking about, pointing out some of the issues and challenges there. We've been able to take that on board and change our designs, which is never easy when you're dealing with Network Rail and rail operators. But we've managed successfully to deal with that. But yeah, it's been a very inclusive process over many years, which I think has helped to build confidence from the cycling, walking, and accessibility groups.
Okay, that's really good. And then just a step further down, there's one that which I've recognised from lots of implementations in lots of places, is that sometimes there's a really good design, but then when it's implemented, you get things like rippled tarmac, lack of priority at the junctions, which I guess is designed street furniture in the middle of the cycle lane and so forth. What thoughts do you have on how you make sure that the original vision is carried all the way through the detail stages?
Well, for those from my team on the line at the moment, they'll know that I like to get involved all the way down through to the detail, and
that's
so,
one way to do it.
And so does our elected city mayor. He's a detail. He what he doesn't know about cycleways and provision is worth knowing almost. But yeah, I mean, we I think you've got to. You can't just design something and it will happen. I think you've got to continually keep a close eye on how that gets translated into delivery. We have had challenges, the design through to build sometimes throws up some things that just, they're built, you think, that's just not going to work. And we have been able to change things as they're being built. We have had one or two examples of posts in the middle of cycleways, but we learn quickly, and those that are charged with delivering things learn quickly. And I can't recall anything like that. I'll probably have one of those tomorrow now, but no, certainly we've been able to avoid those sorts of issues and learn from learn from doing, really, I suppose. But yeah, it's been a learning exercise, because, as I say, we have had to educate designers, developers, and those that build and construct these things, to ensure that they're asking the difficult questions. Actually, does this work? Is this right? That comes back up the chain, and sometimes at cost, we've had to change things, either just as they're being built, or indeed sometimes afterwards. But I think we're confident enough to do that and to withstand any sort of criticism.
Great, and we're getting a little short on time, and it'd be good. You've been answering questions very well, so I'll look to wrap up shortly. But let's finish on one which is it is part. Actually, there's two which are part suggestions and part questions. One from Rachel and one from Adam. So one of them is, is there a plan, which is kind of, why don't you have a cycling route map for Leicester that's like a big circuit where you can go around and take in all the sites. So that, because I think she can see that there's a loop potential, cycling loop potential. And then the other from Adam is, what about, to jump to the chase, it's what about free bus tickets on football match days to reduce some of the traffic problems that a big cluster of football fans all heading for the same place at the same time inevitably causes, included in the price of the football tickets, so that there wasn't even the question of it not being there.
Yeah, on the route map, and it's just something that we've been wanting to develop. We have on our website all of the cycleways laid out there, and some of you may remember, during COVID, we did an equivalent of a London Tube map for our pop-up cycleway schemes, which actually made its way onto a GCSE paper, which we were quite proud of. And I'd like to think that we could do something similar for our cycleways across the whole of the city, and that might include the outer area that connects a number of different employment sites, hospitals, leisure and tourism sort of centres. I think that's probably something that we would want to try and develop over time. In terms of integrated ticketing with our sports teams, it's not always been so easy and straightforward to work with those and deliver that. They have a particular focus in their world. We try and join up, park and ride, for instance, and ensure things are connected. We have a new, I say new, it's been there for about 18 months now, a city centre free bus that goes around the city centre in a ring road and connects retail areas with bus stations, rail station, rugby ground, the LRI, Leicester Royal Infirmary, etc. And that's proved incredibly popular at moving people around the centre. So we're trying to ensure that what we do is integrated and joined up as much as we can. Again, the future of that very much depends on the availability of government funds to fund things like our bus service improvement plan. And that's been developed very much as part of our sort of Connecting Leicester program over the years. So still work to do on that, and I think there's still a journey with the likes of the football club and trying to get a better sort of deal for fans to get to and from the club as sustainably as they possibly can.
Great, thank you very much, Andrew. That was really terrific, and there's questions that I've left unasked because of the time, and but there are also plaudits in the chat about what you've been doing. A stonking job is one of them, so that's a great credit to you and your team. And I think the fact that it's part of a long-term plan, so you've been able to set a long-term vision and then work steadily for it, I think is credit to the fact that these things do take long-term planning, a long-term vision, and gradually working towards it, which of course for outside the city regions has been tantamount to impossible, but hopefully that's a direction that is becoming a bit more achievable soon. So thank you very much, and there's some electronic applause going off across the various windows here.
Thank you.
So we'll bring the session to a close there. Thank you everybody for attending. We will be back next week. Next week we have Mark, our ranty highwayman, the nation's ranty highwayman, in fact, talking about the good, the bad, the interesting of infrastructure. Due to a little bit of a scheduling issue, we have no other speaker planned for next week, and so we're going to use the time to discuss what we would like to see in future sessions of Active Travel Cafe, and possibly also a bit of time in thinking about what we'd like to see the government bring forward when it brings us unprecedented levels of funding, or in its policies will bring forward. We'll see how the time goes, but it'll be a bit more freeform next week, apart from Mark's session, which are always super interesting. So have a good week, enjoy your active travelling, and we will see you then. Bye-bye.